I thought some of you asked when you saw my coat this morning, is he full of new wine? Hey, this week I am getting on a plane on Thursday morning and I'm flying to Florida because we're doing a wedding for Samantha Masimoto, one of the childs of the St. John Church and part of our community. And so I'm going to be headed out and be down there this weekend to be a part of that family's big day. So I won't be up here with you next Sunday, but I wanted to let you know who your preacher next Sunday is, because they're going to want your support. Your preacher next Sunday is the one and only Bridget Nelson. Will be preaching the word next Sunday. So she's entitling the sermon "The Rebuttal." So everything I've ever said about her from stage, she's going to come up here and correct all of those things. But if you could come next Sunday and offer Bridget your prayerful support, and she's practicing this sermon with me at National Coney Island on Friday, and I suddenly was just like crying. So it's really good. I mean, the lady came up and says, "Are you guys okay?" I'm like, "Oh, we're more than okay." Oh, I just love her very much. So I want to begin our message today by taking you back to the year 1871. 1871, the fastest growing city in America was Chicago. Chicago was booming. It was growing just exponentially. It was exploding in size. The Windy City was drawing people from everywhere. They were building things without a plan. They were putting houses next to factories, next to businesses, next to sawmills. It was a fast-growing, disorganized body with a dry, wooden skin. And as summer gave way to fall and the temperatures began to drop, each of these buildings was stacking firewood to be stored away for the upcoming winter. Then, as the rumor goes, Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked the lantern over in the shed, and the whole city went up in flames. It swept through the entire city. Flames walked faster than you could run, strolling through banks and hotels and offices and homes. It was a wildfire. And it spread across that city over the course of 2 days. Over 2,000 acres of that city was touched by that fire. 18,000 buildings. That wildfire left nothing untouched in its wake. And all it took for that fire to spread was one spark in just one place. That is what we call Pentecost. A day when we remember that just one spark in just one place created a movement that has spread like wildfire. It was the upper room in Jerusalem that Janet just told us about. That was the place. And in there had gathered 12 disciples, and something happened in that room that day. It says the windows of the room blew open, and suddenly there was wind. There was this fresh air coming into the place. It was suddenly a fill with a fresh new perspective. And then the story says if you were watching, suddenly little flames started popping up over everybody's head. You got to just know that this is really cool to watch your jacket just kind of glow while you do this, right? You know, just little flames started popping up over everybody's head. You could look out and you could literally see people aglow with God's Spirit. And then it said that people began to speak a different language, a new language. It says people who used to only be able to speak doubt were suddenly speaking a new language of hope. And people who could only speak a language of fear were suddenly speaking a new language of courage. And people who could only speak of greed were suddenly talking about generosity. And people who could only speak about division were suddenly talking about coming together. There was this whole new language. A church that only used to talk about its glorious past suddenly began to talk about its remarkable future. And it all happened with one spark in one place that began a movement that started to spread around the world. In just 300 years, this movement that started out with 12 men, all of Jewish ancestry, all living in this one little corner called Israel, Palestine. In just 3,000 years, it became a movement of upwards of 300,000 people. And it encompassed most of the Middle East and what we now call Southern Europe and Northern Africa. And here's what I want you to think about for a minute. That movement spread before Twitter, before Facebook, before newspapers or mass media or 24-hour news cycles. This movement spread person to person throughout the world. And so I spent this week trying to figure out, what is it that makes an idea spread? What makes an idea spread like wildfire? What is it that takes a book like this? Harry Potter, turned down by at least 12 publishers as saying this is a book that nobody's gonna like, and have it become the #1 selling book series in history. 500 million copies of this book have sold. How did it spread? And the amazing thing is, I remember when it came out, suddenly these young boys in this neighborhood I was living in Southwest Detroit, for whom prior to this, all I could talk to them about was baseball and video games, suddenly were coming up to me and talking about this new book that they were reading. How did this book spread like wildfire? How does an idea take hold? Or how about this guy's idea? Remember this guy? Otto Rodweeder. Yeah, I mean, right. Do you know that he has done something that every one of us has encountered this week? And you don't even remember him, but trust me, you remember his idea, because it was him at a bakery in Chillicothe, Missouri in 1928 that he introduced Americans to this. Sliced bread. It was the greatest idea since, we're not even sure what the great idea before sliced bread is. All we know is that in 1827, he created the first bread slicing machine. And here's what the newspaper wrote about this great new idea, reminding us that at first, new ideas don't spread. Here's what his hometown newspaper wrote. The idea of sliced bread may be startling to some people. Certainly, it represents a departure from the usual manner of supplying the consumer with baked loaves. If you research some church minutes, it sounds an awful lot like that, right? But here's the deal. By 1940, just 13 years later, the idea that bread was to be bought sliced so hooked Americans that by its disappearance, for those few months in the middle of World War II, when sliced bread was taken off of the shelves as a conservation measure meant to save the tons of steel that went into slicing machines, when sliced bread disappeared, it was a national crisis. According to a 1943 Time magazine article, the ban on sliced bread provoked as much ire as gas rationing. So much so that the ban was lifted just 2 months after it was put into effect. Sometimes ideas take such hold that you don't even realize there was a time before that idea was even in place. What makes an idea spread? What makes an idea take hold? My research this week brought me up to one of the great thinkers and entrepreneurial minds of our time, a man by the name of Seth Godin. And Seth Godin said that entrepreneurial marketers know one thing about ideas. If you want to make an idea spread like wildfire, there's one thing it has to be. It has to be remarkable. Now, there is a cool word, remarkable. Usually when we think about remarkable, we think it means neat or cool or different. But what remarkable means, Godin says, is that it's after you've encountered it, you can't help but talk about it. It's worthy of remark. I imagine that every one of us has had an encounter with something that after we've seen it, feel it, experienced it, we couldn't help but tell somebody about it. Maybe it was a great book. Maybe it was an awesome new band. Maybe it was a restaurant, a movie, a TV show. It might even be a church. But that after you've experienced it, you are compelled to tell somebody about it. Because it's worthy of remark. This is the Magic Castle Hotel in Los Angeles. It is not very magical looking. It barely even looks like a hotel. It's actually an apartment complex that was built in the 1950s, and the rooms in it are totally average. The pool, totally average. The lobby, totally below average. So why am I talking about this otherwise seemingly unremarkable hotel? Is because according to TripAdvisor, it is the #2 rated hotel in the largest city in the United States. Why are so many people talking about this otherwise average-looking hotel? Is because next to its very average-looking hotel, there is a cherry red phone that has a sign above it that says, Popsicle Hotline. That's right, anytime, day or night, at the Magic Castle Hotel, you can pick up the Popsicle Hotline, and on the other side of the line, you will hear, Popsicle Hotline, we'll be right out. And within minutes, somebody comes out wearing a suit, white gloves, presents you with a silver tray with grape, cherry, and orange popsicles. Now that is remarkable. 2 years later, if you've stayed at the hotel, you're not going to remember the average bed or the below average lobby. But what you are going to remember is when you picked up the Popsicle Hotline, somebody came out and gave you a popsicle. And here's the deal. The next time one of your friends is going to go to LA, especially if they got kids, where are you going to tell them they should stay? At this otherwise very average motel. Something about it is remarkable. Remarkable ideas spread like wildfire, and that's exactly what happened on Pentecost 2,000 years ago. The remarkable idea that Jesus started began to spread beyond him. If it had just stayed with him, you and I wouldn't be here today. But that idea spread beyond him, and that spark of inspiration began to light up others. And before you knew it, a whole new community was ablaze, spreading an idea that simply needed to be shared. So what is that remarkable idea that sits at the center of this Jesus movement that you and I are sitting here 2,000 years later connected to? What was the remarkable idea that spread like wildfire? Strip it all away, and I believe you will find this one remarkable idea at the center of it, and it is this, that God calls ordinary people to change the world. That is the spark that began with Jesus. And in his day, that idea was truly remarkable. Because in Jesus' day, there was this belief that God, in fact, did not use ordinary people. In fact, there was a belief that God didn't like ordinary people, that God didn't have anything to do with ordinary people. There was this belief that when it came to God, God only was interested in extraordinary people, extraordinary people, people like priests and prophets and judges and kings, that God only spoke with and through men. And suddenly here comes Jesus with this remarkable idea that God uses ordinary people to change the world. Jesus went around calling regular people fishmen to change the world. Regular people, tax accountants, to come and change the world. Jesus hung out with farmers, and he gave women not just a place at the table, but a place of leadership in the movement. He made friends with foreigners and strangers and the poor. Imagine growing up in a world where you have been told from the moment you were born in every way that God had no place or no use for you. That you just weren't special enough to make a difference in the world. That all you had to do every day was get up, go to work, come home, go to bed, get up tomorrow and do the same thing over again for the rest of your life. And for the big problems of the world, you don't need to worry about those, because God knows who God wants to use to do something about that. And you don't have to worry about that. Imagine growing up in a world like that. And along comes Jesus. And he says, you. Yeah, you. You. I need you. I need you to help me get this world set right. I need you to help me feed hungry people. I need you to help me care for the sick and the shut-in in this world. I need you to go out and visit those who are locked and left behind bars. God needs you. Yes, you. Can you imagine if you actually started to believe that? Man, the next person you ran into who told you they weren't good enough or smart enough to be used by God, you would say, that's not true, because God's using me. So God can also use you. That's the idea that began to spread. And that gets me fired up. That's what I want to be about. This movement of calling ordinary people like you and me to partner with God in changing the world, to make it just a little more like God has always intended it to be. And isn't that why you're here this morning? I mean, don't you want to be a part of something that matters? I mean, that really matters? That really makes a difference in the world? That's why I'm wearing red today. Because this stuff gets me fired up. I don't want you to miss this. We are the body of Christ. We are the hands and feet and voice and the heart of God to this world. And that's what we're inviting you and this entire community around us to be a part of. We aren't inviting people to be a part of some religious experience. We're not inviting people to ascribe to some doctrinal standard or some political agenda. No, we're inviting people to come and partner with God and us in making this world just a little better for regular people. And you're invited to come and join the world, change the world with us. I hope that's what makes Royal Oak First remarkable. When people leave here, I don't want them to walk out of here and say, man, the music today was remarkable, even though it was. I don't want you to walk out of here and go, the preaching was remarkable, even though it wasn't. And at the end of the day, I don't want people after this building project that is this close to being done, I don't want people to walk out of here and go, that building is remarkable. You need to come and see the building. No, we want people to leave here and say, you got to see what's going on inside that building. You got to see what God is doing in the people of Royal Oak First. You got to see it. God is doing something. God is taking really weird or regular people and doing something extraordinary with them. Please don't ever invite someone to come to church. Invite them to come and change the world with you. Don't invite someone to come to church. Invite them to come and be a part of changing the world together. God calls ordinary people to change the world. And here's the deal. That call is open to all people. Black, white, Hispanic, and Asian, rich, poor, young, old, gay, straight, transgender, young, old, liberal, conservative, progressive, and traditionalist, Republican, and Democrat. And here's what happens when God starts to use regular, ordinary people to change the world. People like Andrew, who isn't any more regular and ordinary than anybody I've ever met, suddenly starts to have an extraordinary group of teenagers around him that he's pouring his life into and teaching them music and joy. And this is what else happens. People like Mary and Inga knit beautiful washcloths that go to the Brightmoor Free Store and to Cass Community Social Services, so that when somebody comes to the store, they aren't getting some secondhand, hand-me-down rag. They're getting a beautiful handmade washcloth that they can take home with them. And people like Fred Bowden, who when I first met here was pushing a broom around this place. And I suddenly realized that this janitor was a pastor in a way that I only wished I could be. Hey, Fred, you ever think about being a pastor? I'm just a janitor. Go ask the people at Flint Charity today who's preaching the word to them. God uses ordinary people to change the world. People like Jocelyn and Lori, who are stylists, and once a month they come here and set up the Sinners and Saints Salon, where they cut the hair of the hungry and homeless of our community and give them a little bit of their dignity back. Or people like Chef Dave next door at Pronto, who's opened up his restaurant to make sure that anybody who needs an extra meal in the month of May didn't need to go looking. They just could come in and get one. Or Robin and Mike and our Pride team that set up a booth at the Pride Festival in Ferndale last week with 2 words on it: free hugs. And the word came back to me that Ann Brown was a hugging machine. And Robin and Mike said I couldn't tell you how important it was to have Ann there, and people like Ann. Because church women haven't been present at Pride, and hugs haven't been given out freely. You got Leonard, who lives in the hotel up the road, but every day you can't walk into this church without hearing music from Leonard. And Robin and Mike and Ann, who are building churches in Lithuania, and Kathy, who's learning how to make food on freight cars so that the poor among us have access to vegetables all year round. And Rick and Reed, who give up their Saturday afternoons to go repair porches of people that were strangers, but by the end of the day, felt like they were family. Amazing things happen when this idea that God uses ordinary people to change the world starts to take root and spread. It's called Pentecost. And that's what we're here today. And as Caleb's reminding us, it only takes a spark to get that fire going. And soon all those around will warm up in its glowing, because that's how it is with God's love. Once you've experienced it, you spread God's love to everyone. You want to pass it on. Jesus was the spark, and that spark spread to 12 men who now suddenly are part of a movement that encompasses the world. And so here's what I'm looking for today. Is it 12? It started with 12 in Jerusalem. I'm looking for 12 today. 12 people who would just come up here and say, I want to help spread God's love in the world. Your mission's in here. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I'm going to just wait here until 12 people come up and take one of these envelopes. And I can wait all day. So here we go. Hold on to your envelope. 1, 2. Are you a team or separates? 3, 4, and together. 5, 6. Fellas, you're being outdone here big time. Thank you, Jason, for representing. 1 left. All right, open your envelope. This is your mission, and you have chosen to accept it. All right, let's see what you got in there. Show everybody. You have a fake $50 bill. All right, but here's the deal. At the end of the service, you're going to go out there, and Jennifer's going to give you a real $50 bill. A crisp, clean, new $50 bill. And here's the things I want you to know about that $50 bill you're going to get today. That's the spark. That somebody's investing in you today. And here's what you need to know. This isn't your money. It's the community's money. 3 families each donated $500 today because they believe in what God does through ordinary people like you. And here's what you got. You got 50 days. Pentecost 2.0. 50 days to think and pray about what God can do in you to take that $50 and make an impact in the world with it. Think about it. Pray about it. Dream about it. And then unleash that idea into the world. And the only thing I ask is 50 days from now is that you come back and you tell us what God did with you and through you through this little piece of investment that God is doing in the world. Spread love like wildfire. Spread joy like wildfire. Spread justice like wildfire. Be a part of this movement that spreads through the world. Because I'm stepping back and looking at this group. Man, this is a pretty ordinary looking group of people. And this is exactly the kind of people that God uses to change the world. That's right. Want to know something remarkable? Today when you say, what'd you do at church? Say, I went to a church that gave out more money than it took in. Right? Because we don't want to keep the money here. We need to get it out of here and get it out into the world. And I imagine somebody's out there now. If I'd have known that that was going to be, I'd have signed up. Let me know. I'll find $50 for you. Or let them know, and they'll partner with you. Or find someone sitting around you and say, I got 25, you got 25, let's do this together. And if you join this little spreading movement, let us know, because 50 days from now, we want to tell this story. Would you thank this group of 12 for coming on up, and you can go back and sing your shares. Yay! Thanks, brother. All right, if any of you totally regret that, I can't help you. Jesus called. This is what it looks like when ideas spread through ordinary people. Welcome to Pentecost Sunday. It is a lot more than just wearing red. It's about sharing this idea with everyone that God has chosen you and ordinary people like you to do nothing short than getting this world a lot closer to the way God has always intended it to be. Happy Pentecost, my friends.